Hi, I'm Lea Levine and this is Classy Boy.
Lovely to see you.
And you too, Rick. Thank you very much for having us.
You're very welcome. Now, we are going to do something interesting today. We're going to be following the footsteps of Asclepius. Asclepius? Son of Apollo. I think that's pronounced correctly. Asclepius used to use dogs in his temples of healing because he was a medical genius. He used to use dogs to lick the wounds of the people who came to see him with various ailments, and this goes back, I think, 500 years BC. Dogs are important in your life. Can you tell us what's going on? Tell us the story.
Right, this here Classy Boy is the Accidental Chihuahua, who turned my life around after I had a stroke and lost my sight on one side. I found that I couldn't see anything on the left-hand side, so every time I went out I was bumping into old people, children, bollards, lampposts, and basically looking aright, not quite all there, and I was worried that as I bumped into people so frequently, somebody was going to lose their temper with me. So I lost a lot of confidence going out on my own. Then 3 accidents, and this is number 3. So the first was the stroke, my cerebral accident. The second was finding that I could no longer read with any comfort, but I could actually write.
Extraordinary.
I know, it was really strange. Writing became far easier than any other task. Like making a cup of tea was an awful lot harder than spending 6-7 hours on the computer writing. I had to experiment with lots of different software, with voice recognition and software that will read back to me what I'd written, but that was still easier than doing anything practical. But that meant I was stuck in the house all the time. And then accident number 3, my partner arrived at the front door one morning with a surprise for me. And I was thinking all sorts. Ticket somewhere nice, holiday, but no, it was a dog. It was an unwanted dog. It was a Chihuahua who had been thrown out of 2 homes already. And to pay £800 for a dog and then give it away gave me the impression that he might be a little bit difficult. So I was a bit grudging, a bit resentful, but I discovered that when I took him out, he walked on my blind side and he would steer me round hazards. So I would have far less accidents. Plus, if I did something stupid, like I couldn't remember my words when I was asking for something, or I did bump into somebody, nobody would mind because he was so cute. And then he started leading me to the cafes. After we go to the park, he would choose a direction. At that point, I didn't know that you're supposed to be in control of the dog rather than the other way round. So he would lead me to the doorsteps of this lovely cafe underneath the railway arches right by the park. So we'd go in, we'd sit down, I'd have a coffee, and I'd be able to think through my writing for the day, bring my tablet, get a bit of work done. We'd share a coffee because he's rather partial to the foam, soya milk, obviously, because he's a dog, and people would start chatting to us. So I had my company, I was getting out 3 times a day, and he was being fussed over, which I don't think he'd had the experience of before, because in his first home he was shut in a back room, and in the second home he was looked after by someone who loved him very much but wasn't able to get out herself because she wasn't well. So this was his first time being out in the world, and it was like going out with Lady Diana, because every time we'd go anywhere people would stop us, they'd ask to stroke him, pet him, and then people started taking photographs. And there was one shop we went into, and the person who was helping me get a case for my mobile phone said, did I mind if she Skyped her family back in India? So we had this great Skype session with all her family, children and adults, squeezed onto this one couch, and myself, the shop assistant and the boy, having a great conversation. I also know photos of him have been sent to Japan and China.
And his name is?
Classy boy. Well, he's got several names. The first name he was given was Lionel, after Lionel Shriver. He came from a litter where the couple that bred Chihuahuas, one was a photographer and the other was a writer and artist who was particularly fond of the French surrealists. So they would name their puppies after the various favourite films and authors. So he was named Lionel after Lionel Shriver, and I think he came out the best because his brother was called Le Chien de Loup, but Andy for short.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about how it's going and what it's all about?
I was forced into early retirement. I was a teacher for almost 30 years and found being forced not to stop doing the one thing that I really loved was incredibly difficult to get used to, and it took me about a year of resisting it and trying to continue working. Then I had the great stroke of luck that I discovered that writing was possible, so I wrote a couple of textbooks to help the students who I had been teaching, and that was great. But then I was getting to the point where I felt I wanted something more, and my other accident or stroke of luck was that we went on an unexpected holiday. We went to Malta for a week, a last-minute holiday, and I got really frustrated because I couldn't read. Normally on a holiday, I'd sit back, enjoy a really good detective novel, and normally I'd have brought a whole load of books set on the island where we were going, and I would have got into the history and learnt about the history and culture through what I read. So I was feeling a bit lost, and the hotel had left this big notepad on this beautiful desk, and we're in a lovely, very atmospheric hotel. And one day I'm sitting on the balcony listening to the church bells, and there's a lot of church bells because there are 365 churches on the island. So I'm listening to these, and I'm looking at the amazing ancient walls of Valletta, the ramparts, the gardens. There is more history on that island per square foot than I think anywhere else. And I could almost feel the history, like people walking past me, past the battlements, along the harbour, and just in the hotel. The hotel was a really strange mixture of modern and old-fashioned, and I felt like I could feel people walking past me. And
did you have the dog with you at the time?
I didn't have the dog at that point, so I was thinking about the books I would have read, and I had this notepad on my lap, and it was like these characters came to life in my head, and I was just there to write it down. So that started me off writing a series of 3 slightly comic murder mysteries. The first was set in Malta, called imaginatively Dead in Malta. Features a young woman called Anna, who is on holiday with her partner and her partner's friends and is feeling very insecure about the relationship. And she creates an alter ego as her escape mechanism, and her alter ego is based on her favourite elderly sleuths, Angela Marbury and Agatha Christie. So her heroine is called Angela Marbury, and Angela Marbury, wherever she goes, ends up uncovering dead bodies. So Anna's busy writing this and unexpectedly has to deal with a very, very violent attack in the midst of her group of friends. Then about 6 months later we go to Lanzarote, and so does Anna and her friends and Angela Marbury, and there we discover the issue of the problems faced by expats, retired expats who go to Lanzarote and the other Canary Islands and suddenly find that they're thrown back on their partners for the first time in perhaps 40 years. And there's a huge problem of homelessness and domestic violence on the island. So that gave me a really good window into the second in the series, which is called Languid in Lanzarote. I then had to have a series of small heart operations and got to spend overnight in an old-fashioned hospital, and that led to a novel called The Nurse's Station, where Anna stays overnight in hospital to find out what is happening to these young Eastern European women that keep disappearing in the middle of the night off this particular ward, and involves the tunnels underneath Camden Town. So I have my writing, which gives me purpose, structure. Then I have the boy, and we go out together sitting in the cafes of Primrose Hill, and we meet these amazing other dogs and hear other dog stories. We find out about Lucky, the young Afghan hound who was retired from the army, she was a search and rescue dog. She'd be dropped down the ravines and would find people, and her last job she saved a 7-year-old girl who had fallen down a ravine in Wales and was able to attach the harness, and she and the dog were airlifted together out of the ravine and to safety. I also met a dog in Primrose Hill who was saved from Afghanistan by a foreign correspondent, and I've met amazing stories of other therapy dogs and assistance dogs. And my next stroke of luck was that I was referred to a neuro-occupational therapist at the National Hospital for Neurology. And she was amazing. She taught me that the way to get through something is education, that knowledge is power. She said that my condition wasn't going to improve. Every new situation I went into would be really demanding on my brain, and my brain would put 10 times more effort into making sense of what was in front of me than it would have before, because it was seeing things in fragments. I was really, really low after that. And then she carried on encouraging me to understand more about what goes on in the brain with this particular condition and to find out more information. So I went back to my neurologists and said, are there any books for other younger people who have strokes, have this condition called hemianopia, who want to know more about the condition and strategies that other people use to go back to work? And every person I spoke to said nothing's been written about that, because very few people do manage to continue working afterwards because it messes up your ability to read. So I wasn't happy with that. So decided I was going to set myself a project over 1 year, see how much I could learn about the condition and about the experiences of other people who face being retired earlier than they want to because of a shock chronic health diagnosis, and how they cope, how they manage to turn the negative into a positive. And what the OT taught me is you can't just look for the silver lining. You also have to really come to terms with the limitations, that you have to find a way to work with them. I had been happily living in denial and had actually made my situation worse. I'd thought, if I push myself, I will get better. It's all about pushing yourself hard enough, and then you can go back to your old life. And what this wonderful young woman taught me was that it's not like that. You have to accept what you've got, but find the gaps around it, find the spaces that do still work and work with them. So with my new writing career and with the dog, I felt much more positive and thought, I've got to go and find other people who've done this and learn from them. Then I joined a writing group, and it was the most fabulous writing group. And I got invited to join them to go to London Book Fair. Now, London Book Fair was something a cousin of mine used to come over from Canada to go to every year because she was in publishing. And for me, it represented everything magical about books and publishing. And it was a world I never thought I could be a part of. But at that point, I'd had my first textbook published. I was working on the second. I'd got my outline of the 3 novels, and I thought, I can do this. So I went, and it was a really big deal to work out the logistics of going somewhere crowded that I'd never been to before. And I went to all these sessions, and it was amazing. And the first day I was beside myself with excitement. The second day I saw Marianne Keyes speaking. I saw the woman who wrote When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit and Mog, Judith Kerr, and she was just recovering from a hip operation, but there she was at London Book Fair telling us all about the amazing escape from Nazi Germany that her family had had. And her book, When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit, was one of my all-time favourite books that I'd read when I was a child. So this was magic. But then the final afternoon, I hear various authors talking about how half their time is spent on social media, and that it's not enough just to write a book. You have to be able to blog about it, tweet about it. And I'm thinking, I have nothing to say. There is nothing that I can say that hasn't been said 100 times by other writers far better. And I feel a bit beside myself, and I'm on the train on the way home thinking, oh, I've overstretched myself, it's unrealistic. And then suddenly it comes to me, there is one thing I can do that no one else that I know of can talk about. And that is what it's like to write when you can't read anymore. And that gave birth to the Accidental Chihuahua as a project. So I decided I was going to spend a year from one London book fair to the next one the following spring and see what I could learn from other people who've got over or found a way to live creatively with a health diagnosis that turned their world upside down.
Oh, that's a lovely sound. Lea, can you please tell us something about how your body was affected by your stroke? Because I think it would be helpful and it might resonate with other people who may have experienced the same symptoms as you.
Yeah, what I found really interesting is, although my stroke was very particular in that it affected the occipital lobe in my brain, which is the part of your brain that processes what you see. So my eyes were working fine, it was just my brain wasn't processing as it used to. But that a lot of the other issues I faced are common to people who've had a whole host of other changes in their health. Issues of fatigue, coordination, word finding, short-term memory, and the issue of not being able to find a memory or place it. The psychologist I saw for an assessment after the stroke said it's like having a filing cabinet where every file has a name on it, and if somebody tells you the name of the file, you can find the memory in it. But if they don't give you the name of the file, you just don't know where to start. So she'd say, if I ask you what you did on Tuesday, you wouldn't have a clue, and she was right. But she said, if I said, did you have a nice time at the zoo, I'd know exactly what she was talking about. The sight issue, it's like being on a moving walkway, that things come to me faster than I can make sense of them. Sometimes people speak and I'm focusing on what I'm looking at, so their mouths are moving, but I can't make sense of what they're saying. And that often happens in a shop, which is really embarrassing. Also, the ground seems to move up and down depending on the reflections of the light. So I might suddenly stop walking in the street because I think there's a large precipice in front of me, but there isn't. So the dark, the rainy nights or bright sunshine are quite tricky. But the issues that are more common are the fatigue. I was told it's a very different sort of fatigue to what you might have had before, and managing a life and balancing activities you used to do without thinking about. Having to plan rest breaks is really tricky, and I think that's probably true of people with a whole host of different conditions. It's also the issue of trying to get used to a new you, where you feel the same on the inside, and it's only when you get up to do something you realise you're not. And it's like, how can you look the same and feel the same, but actually your body doesn't work like it used to? So it's getting used to a new body at a time when you've inhabited your own for so long, everything is second nature. Other issues are word finding and memory, and I have found that's true of people in so many different situations, and often women going through the menopause talk about word finding difficulties, but they can be quite funny. With my partner, we have a great laugh over the mistakes I've made. Like last week I asked if she could go out and buy some cat food, and she looked quite horrified, like had I got us a new pet. Another time I had a slight disagreement with the person in the ticket office at the train station because I was insistent that he sold me a ticket for yesterday. So I'll often use the wrong word, but it's a word that somehow relates to the one that I was looking for. So maybe cat versus dog, yesterday and today being days of the week. But my favourite was when I got up in the middle of the night and found there was a pan on the stove that had been left on a low light with some big pot of soup in it, and we'd gone to bed about an hour before. And it was okay, there was just a lot of steam, a lot of smoke coming from the pot because it had boiled dry. So I call up and say, I plan to say, there's a lot of smoke in the kitchen. Instead, the words that come out is, the kitchen's on fire. And I have to say it took a long time to be forgiven for that.
Okay, well, I think it's time now to tell us about the book you're writing, The Accidental Chihuahua.
Yeah, The Accidental Chihuahua is a book and it's a project. I decided I'd give myself a year from one London book fair to the next to see how much I could learn. And I started keeping a journal of everything I learn each day, and there's an incredible amount that I have learnt, and it covers three main areas. It's finding out what strategies other people use to recover from whatever the life-changing health diagnosis is that they had, and finding information for myself that I need to know so that if I know what I'm dealing with, if I know my enemy, I can find my way around it. But then decided to focus on the strategies that really work for me as well. So it's a bit of a three-pronged project. So it's all about recovering from brain injury and other illnesses or conditions, but it's also about the two big strategies that help me the most, and that is writing and it's the dog. So I decided that in The Accidental Chihuahua, over a year I would focus on what I learn about dogs, about how dogs help people, how to look after dogs, about dog behaviour, about the dogs we meet, dogs in history, how the role of the dog changed so much in Victorian England, and again, as you mentioned, Rick, how the dog was really significant in prehistory. Classy is also a Chihuahua, which may have Mexican roots, so there's a lot of debate about where they originate from, and they had a really interesting role in the palaces in Mexico, so I look at that as well. And I also explore the world of writing, so it's finding out about publishers. So I've got the experience of self-publishing and publishing an educational text, but I wanted to find out what else is there. So I joined various writing groups, went to an amazing haunted writers retreat in the mountains in Spain, and went to Margate Bookie, went to a whole range of book festivals here and abroad, including the Maltese Book Fair, where I went partly to experience the book fair and also to do a lot of research for Dead in Malta, and managed to get into the National Archives and the National Library, where they've got the original letter awarding the island the George Cross and the original documents that the Knights Templar brought with them when Philip of Spain granted them the island of Malta as a gift. Then we went to Israel and I went to the Jerusalem Book Fair and carried out research in Yad Vashem for one of the storylines, and had an amazing time in the Dead Sea. We've been to the Triskelly Lit Fest, which looked at self-published crime literature, and every month we've been to book events, talks by authors, book fairs, festivals, and have been learning as much as I can about publishers. We've met agents and found out what's involved in creating a synopsis and a covering letter for an agent, and joined various organisations like the Writers Guild of Great Britain, and found out about what every author needs to know before they want their book published. So lots of tips on the practicalities of writing, how to get over writer's block, the software that can help, the difference between being a plotster and a pantster, about story arc, about conflict, about developing character, and practical stuff about the organisations that can support you if you're doing it on your own. So there's that strand to the book. There's also a lot about dog history and dogs in literature and cinema, And there's the strand about how people find ways to build a really creative life in a difficult situation.
So we're going to listen to the story, part of the story. We're all going to enjoy this because this is actually the meat of the book. I don't know where we are in the book.
This is the opening, just the opening chapter.
Okie dokie.
More of a prologue.
Shoot.
9 a.m, 14th of April 2016. Kensington Olympia, outside London Book Fair. She stood outside the gates waiting for them to open, her manuscript clasped protectively under one arm. She thought back to when she stood here a year earlier, how different her life was then. And the prologue. Timeo Danaus et dona ferentes. Beware of Greeks bearing gifts. That's from Virgil's Aeneid. Camden Town, 10 a.m, Thursday, March the 31st. Last night received a short text from Kathy. Popping by at 7 a.m. on the way to work. Very intriguing, though I must remember that tomorrow is April Fool's Day. April. Chapter 1. An unwelcome intruder. Decided to set the alarm so can get up in plenty of time, as it's not often someone makes their way across London just to bring you a gift before they even set off to work. So I must make an effort. I've decided that the message is genuine and not some prank. Kathy didn't say anything at the time, but I'm guessing she knew I was a bit low yesterday after the meeting with Mr. Gloom, the neurologist. 7:30 a.m, the arrival. Next morning. Heard her car draw up, eagerly stumble across the hall, to the intercom to let her in. Can't wait. The intercom must be playing up again, as I can hear a lot of background noise. Screeching. Hard to hear what Kathy's saying, but I think she sounds excited, and I think she said, "You'll never guess what I brought." 7:45 a.m, not on the rug. She was right, and no, my intercom was not playing up. And now, sitting on my lovely cream rug, surrounded by bags of stuff and attempting to overcome the shock. I'm trying to make suitable soothing noises to a small howling ball of fluff that is running round the room in circles and diving behind the couch. Now, what's that smell? No, please, not on the rug. 8 a.m, a glass half empty. Kathy explains it all over her coffee, as I reach for a glass of brandy. I grasp what she is trying to say whilst actually not spelling it out. This unwanted intruder is not a distraction after a bad day. It is here to stay. It is smaller than my last cat, but Kathy assures me it is a dog. A pedigree dog, no less. I now own a Chihuahua. At the age of 47, I become a mother again. The dog is homeless, I am housebound, she says. What a perfect solution, she says with enthusiasm, grinning from ear to ear. I can look after him forever, adopt him, become a mother again at 47. Kathy is still excited, so my poker face must be working. I think she actually thinks I'm as delighted as she is, and that it will work out perfectly. Best for everyone, she says. Blah, blah, blah. I tune out. As she continues talking about fresh air and getting out again, I stick my more metaphorical fingers in my ears and prepare my defence. A logical presentation of facts and the reason why this might not be the best solution for it or for me, and somehow convey that I appreciate the thought but not the gift. So far my list is A, what do I do with it? I've only ever had cats. B, does it bite? My cat did. C, how will it do its business? I live on the first floor. Do dogs use litter trays? D, is it safe to turn my back on it? Because it certainly wasn't with my cat. How do I take it out when I can't even walk myself? F, I know nothing about dogs. And even if I didn't, now I wouldn't remember. G, it's small. What if I sit on it? By the time I started working on point I, Kathy had picked up her car keys, given me a peck on the cheek, and dashed down the stairs, saying something about parking on a double yellow line. 9:30 a.m. Who do you think you are? It settled down the other end of the room and is eyeballing me. I don't want to be the first to look away. If this was a cat, this would be a battle I would have to win. It blinked first, but wordlessly. It told me what it thought of me by twisting round and licking its rear end. It then gave me a sidelong glance as if to make sure I got the message. At least now I know that it is he. Dog fact number 1. I glance over at the dog-related stuff Kathy left. On top of the bags is a battered white plastic wallet. I can tell from the state of it that this is a dog that has moved house often. I reach for the plastic wallet and inside is a certificate that tells me that it is a long-haired Chihuahua. It certainly is long-haired. It's going to be great for my asthma. Second line down tells me his name is Lionel. I heard Kathy call him that, but assumed I'd misheard. I mean, what sort of name is that? I delve further into the pack and discover a doggy birth certificate. It actually records his parents, grandparents, great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents and lists names and occupations, if stud dog counts as an occupation. At least he will never need to take out a subscription to ancestry.co.uk. Then I notice how much he cost. £800. And I get him for free? What does it say if the people who paid £800 for him are happy to give him away? This must be a dog with £800 worth of problems. And little did I realise that pretty soon he too was going to leave me £800 worse off.
Well, that's great. Thanks for giving us that tantalising glimpse into your wonderful story, the Accidental Chihuahua. I'm sure everybody will be interested in following this further and following the story. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rick. It's been really nice talking with you.